Right, good afternoon. Today I'm going to talk about Romance and differential object marking, this morpheme add. I'm going to talk about your nominal and verbal feature syncretisms and the proto-Romance evolution and whether language concept plays a part in all this. I realize that I've used many technical terms here, but I hope that these technical terms become clearer as we go on. Well, first of all, so Romance and differential object marking. This is a huge phenomenon in Romance, and it's attested in all Romance and varieties. Classic works like Rolfe and Rogius, have shown that a Romance differential object marking is attested to varying extents in different Romance and varieties. A famous quote by Nocentini. I shan't read it out here, but the keywords as emphasized by Zamboni, also Rosanna Sonicola, is that this phenomenon is layered in terms of time, in terms of space, and also in terms of it seems to be in an incipient phase in many areas. This entails that there is a lot of layering of different types, historical, socio-linguistic, and also geographical layering, which also entails a micro variation in Romance Dom. There are two main morphemes there that you add is used in Western Romance varieties and also pair in Romanian. In this presentation, I'm going to focus on add and exclude pair. I feel apologetic about doing this because I realize this is a workshop at Bucharest, but I don't speak Romanian, so I cannot really say anything valid about pair. And also, it's probably not necessary to include, both morphemes in a single analysis because the add and pair are clearly etymologically different, and they also have different properties that people have shown. So I think it's probably best that we analyze these separately. There is a lot of micro variation in the use of add in different Romance varieties, as shown by Alexander Mardalen. He compares, Spanish, Romanian, and also Sardinian. However, given just how widely attested add is, and it's attested in all major varieties of Western Romance, a holistic account of add is still missing, and then we can do a lot more in comparing the use of add in all major varieties. Such a wide distribution of add also entails that it goes back to Proto-Romance and Latin, as people like Sonicola also more recently Benjamin Fagat and Mandalen have shown. So what I propose to do today is to look at the historical and comparative micro variation of Western Romance Dom, focusing on this morpheme add. Right. A few things that need to be said about differential object marking. It's not only where it's in Romance. It's a cross-linguistic trend. A recent volume by Serzong and Whitlack have collected the major analyses of Dom in many different languages. If there's a way that we can generalize Dom as a language universal, it's about markedness. In the marked category tend to be more for syntactically marked. And there are different types of markedness, as we show here. Nominal markedness. There are two main factors of animacy and referentiality. There are many different clients that have been proposed, but for animacy, I suppose it's human, animate, and inanimate. Okay, so human is the most marked. Inanimate object is the least marked. Okay, so we would expect marking on human objects, followed by non-human animate, etc. Definite, indefinite specific, and indefinite non-specific. Okay, so similarly, we would expect marking on definite nouns and no marking on indefinite non-specifics. Also, grammatical number, singular in individual, it's more likely to be marked than a plural, to be the mass or the group nouns. Person, the first person, second person, and third person. Also, noun types, pronouns and proper names tend to be more likely to be marked than common nouns. So I think if we put all of these factors together, this we can sort of synthesize the nominal client as something like this. I shan't go through this a bit by bit, as we can see, many scholars have tried to establish the nominal client of markedness. Verbal markedness tends to correlate with transitivity, also effectiveness, also kinesis. The idea is that, formally, in classic works as, Wendler and Doughty, is, there are four types of major events. And verbs denoting achievements and accomplishment are more transitive and effective than activities and states. If we think in terms of semantic primitives, achievements and accomplishments have become, they denote change and makes them different from activities and states. And so we could say that, become as a semantic primitive denoting change is what encapsulates the verbal property of markings. It's become that it's the core in all this. All right, so if we look at some famous examples in Romance, the two main nominal factors in Romance, as we see, is an animacy and a referentiality of the object noun. For example, in Spanish, there's this famous example where busco a una persona que sabe versus busco una persona que sepa. The idea is that the indicative in the first example indicates a specific person, whereas the subjunctive in the second example indicates a non-specific. Like, so we see here a correlates with the specificity of the noun. Specificity of the verb. There is just a famous claim proposed by Potier that different types of verbs tend to select object and mark by ad. So, for example, with strongly affected verbs like matar, to kill, and matar obligatorily select ad. Tener, however, in denoting a possession, doesn't. We also have some minimal pairs of tener, for example. Tener in its canonical function, it denotes possession, and in this sort of function, it does not take a. For example, so tiene dos de hijos. However, in more sort of complex, almost metaphorical usages of tener, we do find a. For example, tiene a su madre cerca, consigo, a su lado, etc. Tengo al presidente, hombre honrado, o tienen al español como idioma oficial. The idea is that a here denotes agency and kinesis. So we think in terms of semantic primitives. Tener here in the last three examples, tener does not denote possession, but it entails the secondary predication because it denotes that the subject is entailing change to the object. The object is being placed in a different state by the subject. So it's kinesis here, which seems to require the use of a. And another common parameter that's been shown is its topicality. Fronted, pre-post, and topical objects can also be marked by a. So, for example, in standard Italian, where dom is generally weak, and then we don't get a marking in standard Italian, fronted objects are marked. So, for example, aggiani, so questi argomenti non convincono. Whereas in its canonical post-verbal position, Gianni, the object is optionally marked. Okay, so topicality topic fronting can trigger the use of ad as well. So if we look at a formal representation of dom in Romance, right? Okay, so if we think in terms of light verbs, in the classic work, they Rappaport, Holbert, and Ramchan said, if you look at your light verbs as semantic primitives in creating events, we get a tree like this, for example, from a bottom-up derivation, where the affectee is, if we use Ramchan's light verb structure, there's initiate, where there's an agent, the result denotes change. The affectee is merged in its a position, so in its specifier position. So the affectee is here, the agent is here in the specifier of initiate, and ad marking is on the affectee. Yeah, there's kinesis here, and there's the agent and the affectee both seem to trigger the use of ad as a marking on the object. And about that, we've got topic marking. Recently, Belletti has shown that topic marking can be formally derived. In the nominal dimension. All right, so again, if we look at the DP hypothesis as applied to Romance by Valois and Longobardi, etc. Right, so we get a structure like this, Again, so a is a case marker, which seems to be the canonical position. And here we get various types of triggers. So, for example, in the nominal root semantic feature of animacy can trigger the use of a. Referentiality, so in the D projection, definiteness and specificity can also trigger the marking. Proper names, so you different types of verbs such as proper names, which are B elements, as argued famously by Longobardi, can also trigger the use of add. And also personal pronouns, which have been analyzed as bare phi elements or bare D elements. These phi features, such as person and number, can also trigger the use of add. Right, so if we look at a classic example of a Romance DOM, such as in Spanish, Spanish has been held to be the prototypical example of DOM in a Romance. So the nominal unmarkedness comes in terms of animacy and referentiality. So for example, if we're looking at an example again, which is similar to the one that we saw a few slides back. Necesita a una enfermera que pasa. Entonces, necesita una enfermera que pase. Okay, so the subjunctive mood there, which denotes specificity and non-specificity, also condition the use of a. However, the idea here is that a is optional, not ungrammatical with a non-specific nouns. People like Clifford and Leo Arnetti have shown that in the second example, necesita a una enfermera que pase la mañana con ella. The a here is optional. It's not ungrammatical. So you can still use it, but it's just not obligatory, which is significant for a language where DOM is heavy, such as Spanish. And so animacy is pretty much a sufficient condition for DOM in Spanish, and if as long as the object noun is animate, you can use a. Also, some sort of metaphorical analogical extensions on animacy, and people have shown that a can also be used for denoting toponyms such as communities and also works in compositions. So, for example, estudia al pueblo de Numancia. It's possible to say that estudia a Numancia in the case of community. Also, it just simply as a place name, estudia a Numancia, etc. In terms of a composition and literary works, for example, tocar a Beethoven, leer a Virgilio. Okay, so these mean to play music of Beethoven, to read works of Virgil, etc. So yeah, so humanists can also be analogically extended. In terms of verbal markerness, kinesis seems also to be an independent trigger for a DOM. It's we have many examples of inanimate objects being marked by add in technical scientific prose. And so the idea is that this is not poetry. This is not personification. This is formal scientific prose. So for example, la primavera precede al verano. Las dificultades privan al proyecto. Modifica al sustantivo, etc. So in these examples, kinesis where agentivity and effectiveness seem to condition the use of a. So this applies even to inanimate nouns of highly affected verbs. All right, so as we can see, so in Spanish, the DOM is heavy, and the DOM is independently triggered by animacy of the noun and kinesis, transitivity of the verb. In other varieties, however, we get a micro variation. For example, in Catalan, the modern Catalonia is a bilingual state. And in the modern Catalan speakers, they're all they're probably the perfect bilingual. They speak Spanish and Catalan equally. Now, this gives rise to many questions about DOM and also many other morpho syntactic features in Catalan. Is whenever we find a common feature between Spanish and Catalan, we can always ask, is it a genuine Catalan feature or is it borrowing from Spanish? But I think despite normative and formal pressures, I think DOM definitely exists in colloquial Catalan, or Catalan speakers have told me that in informal everyday speech, they use dom quite extensively. So so dom seems to be a genuine feature in colloquial Catalan. Right. So the same nominal parameters apply. However, dom add is only obligatory with personal pronouns. So for example, in this example, ajuda a tu m'ajudarás a mí. Okay, so with personal pronouns, a is obligatory. With other types of nouns like proper names and other pronouns, a is optional. So again, there are these examples which I shan't go through. So dom is obligatory with personal pronouns, but optional otherwise. In terms of verb, so again, with effectiveness, there are also examples cited by Anna Pineda in a recent work. There are examples of inanimate objects being marked by affective verbs. So, for example, there are these examples: afectará a la economía. Okay, so afectará the economy. An inanimate noun. This occurs in a newspaper, so this is a formal scientific prose rather than poetic personification. Also in grammatical prose, acompañar el noms, modificar a an adjective, etc. So just like Spanish, Catalan, affective verbs can also trigger dom. The fact that we have a marking on inanimate nouns. In other varieties, however, we get a somewhat different picture. So, for example, in Italian dialects, I was very unfortunate to have attended a presentation by Adam Ledgway in 2018 in Paris, where he gave a very detailed, a very good presentation on the use of a as a dom marker in various Italian varieties. So, dom is pretty prevalent in central and southern Italian dialects, and I'm including Sardinian here, where dom also exists. In terms of anonymity and referentiality, a is obligatory for marking personal pronouns and proper names. So there are these examples in pretty much all the varieties. A is obligatory when it comes to personal pronouns and proper names. Dom also applies to toponyms, noting communities and places, not to literary works. So, for example, in Sardinian, it's possible to say so. So in Sardinian and Neapolitan, it's possible to say that Apo visto a Napoli or soccorrere a la città del loro, etc. But we cannot say legitu a Platone. I read Plato. In terms of common nouns, dom is obligatory only if the noun is referential. So, for example, if it's definite or specific or individual in the sense of being singular. Otherwise, dom is actually it's either optional or ungrammatical. So again, with indefinite nouns, Amazzaru un cristiano. Okay, I have many Sicilians in informants. In our field of linguistics, there are many Sicilian scholars. They all tell me that if the object is indefinite, they almost certainly wouldn't use a. In Barese, for example, in Gigi Andriani's analysis, if it's a prisoner, so, a here is optional. If the object is non-specific, so I'm here, I'm looking for or any person who might read Barese. So a here is ungrammatical. Also, with some number, so for example, if the object is plural or generic, if it denotes a group of people, a is either optional or ungrammatical, as shown here. Right. So the idea is that we have dom obligatorily on personal pronouns and proper names, and also with referential and common nouns. And finally, I would just say that effectiveness of the verb doesn't seem to trigger dom on inanimate nouns because even if the verb is highly effective, add is not permitted if object is inanimate. So, for example, in this example by Gigi Andriani, the tinsmith melts the iron. We cannot say a u piere, even if the verb is highly effective. Finally, in Portuguese, Portuguese has a very particular type of dom that a marca saúde and divindade, and we in both Brazilian and European type of Portuguese, divinity is the main criterion for a marking. So, for example, if the noun denotes God or divinity, for example, temer a Deus, revere God, etc. It can also apply to certain common and proper nouns for social superior beings. If the object noun is a celebrity or someone famous or someone powerful, who's metaphorically like a god, we can also use a. So for example, Clifford. There's a famous example. So respeito ao chefe, ao presidente, ao supervisor, professor, or if you're a football fan, a Cristiano Ronaldo. So yeah, so it's possible to use "a" in denoting people who are more powerful, more famous than you are in Portuguese as well. So the verb also plays a role in there, and it tends to be verbs of respect that trigger the use of "a." So if it's religious, if it's a cult, then it denotes a worship, or if it's secular, it denotes admiration or respect. So for example, amar ao filho, use of "a" here is quite special because we get the minimal pairs like this: amar ao filho versus amar o filho. Okay, so in the first one, ao filho denotes the son of God, so Jesus Christ. The second, however, without "a," it means to love, the son, a real person. The first example denotes worshiply; it's a worship, a religious cult, whereas the second one denotes familial love. And finally, just the first and second person singular personal pronouns can also be marked in Portuguese. So, for example, odeio a ti, odeia a mim. With third person, it's optional. So, odia a ele, ela, etc. Whereas with the first person plural, not in voz, the a is ungrammatical. So to summarize, in Portuguese, a marks certain types of human and animate objects, the verbs that denote respect, which could be either religious or secular, and also use some personal pronouns. Right, so if we just put all of these data comparatively, so we have Spanish, which is a strong type of dom, as is well known. Animacy seems to be a sufficient criterion for dom. If the object noun is animate, we can have dom. It's optional if it's non-specific. Catalan, and also in terms of the verb, is that agentive and effective type of verb can also trigger dom. In Catalan, personal pronouns obligatorily trigger dom. Otherwise, it's optional. And in modern colloquial Catalan, agentive and effective verbs can also trigger dom. In Italian dialect, it's a bit different. Dom is only obligatory on personal pronouns and proper names. Otherwise, dom is only used if human common nouns are referential. And with Portuguese, it's only with personal pronouns in the first and second singular, and also with divine or superior nouns, which can be either proper or common. And here, the verb tends to denote respect or admiration. So, if we put this on a Klein, we may get something like this. Again, I shan't go through this. This is the Klein that we can reconstruct for Western Romance dom. Right. So if we analyze this formula, if we look at the tree again, so we get a on the affectee, and here kinesis. Okay, so the agent and the affectee both seem to trigger dom, and here we get Spanish and Catalan, where the verbal structure can independently trigger dom on on inanimate nouns, where you have the topic marker. And here in Portuguese, the verb root of respect seems also to trigger dom, as we saw in Portuguese. A is only used with the verbs of cult, the verbs of worship. So we could say that there is a verbal syncretism here. If we define syncretism in terms of multiple features. the feature of respect on the verb root, as seen in Portuguese, seems to trigger dom. In the nominal domain, okay, so again we can have the DP tree here. In Spanish, animacy seems to be a sufficient criterion for triggering dom. So again, we see dom as a case marker. In Spanish, animacy seems to sufficiently trigger dom. Whereas in other varieties, it's a bit different. We've seen that proper names and also personal pronouns seem to trigger dom quite strongly in almost all varieties of a Western Romance. So the proper names and personal nouns are marked in all varieties of a Western Romance. So these seem to be the core of Romance dom. In addition, we've seen that undefiniteness, specificities, and individuality seem to play a role as well. And here, Italian dialects come in, because we've seen that in Italian dialects, ad is only used to mark object pronouns if the human object noun is also referential in the sense of being definite and specific and singular. So Italian dialects seem to display nominal syncretisms. It's not just animacy; it's human and referentiality, like definite specificity and singular. So again, in these two trees, we can see that there seems to be verbal and nominal syncretisms, where a mixture of features trigger dom rather than just one feature. Right, so if we look at the proto-Romance, also the Latin formation of dom. People like Jim Adams and Harm Pinkston have shown that ad, which is originally an elative preposition denoting towards, motion towards, it's reanalyzed as a case marker in the proto-Romance. In Latin, ad remains spatial, and most examples of ad denotes a motion towards. But in a proto-Romance, people have shown that ad is a marker of either indirect or direct objects. If we think in terms of inherent case and semantic case, prepositions, I think are probably conventionally shown to be to select inherent and semantic case. In the case of ad, it means towards. It selects objects that denote your direction or destination, and this is of course necessarily referential, because direction, destination are highly deictic. There are also some examples where ad selects human or animate types of objects, such as recipient, beneficiary, and experiencer, where ad seems to come to compete with morphological data. And here the object is animate. So if we're looking at some examples, so for example, and the verbs of vision, in the Latin Bible, Genesis 4:4, respexit ad abo et ad munera eus. Okay. The idea is that respexing is it denotes motion, and ad here denotes the direction and destination. And here the object abo and munera eus is necessarily definite and specific, and denotes directed vision. The verbs of begging, which in the Christian era begin to verbs of praying, we get examples where ad seems to derive from the from ab. For example, in the religious context, such as the Libri Baru, Moses orabat ad dominum, and Moses was praying to the Lord ad dominum. In the secular context, such as the Precon Saletarum, denian ad domino pospos. Okay, so ad domino pospos. But here, we see that the object, dominum, is either human or animate and divine. In the religious context, in a secular context, it's human, animate, also superior. It denotes someone who is more powerful than the speaker. So if you put all of these factors together, if you look at these parameters again, we've established your Latin ad, which denotes elative motion. It selects objects that are either referential or animate. So in Spanish, as you can see, it's animacy. Catalan also animacy, or it's only obligatory on personal pronouns. Italian dialects, personal pronouns and proper names. In Portuguese, it's personal pronouns and divine superior nouns. And agentivity play a role in Spanish and Catalan. In Portuguese, it's respect, the note secondary predication. But there are nominal syncretism in Italian varieties, and there are also verbal syncretisms in Portuguese. And these two types of syncretism are well rooted in Latin, as we saw on the previous slide. So if you ask me where language contact comes in, it seems to be in Spanish and Catalan, where analogical generalization to all animate and affected nouns seem to be result of language contact. It has been shown by people like Kaiser and von Huizinga, who analyzed the diachrony of Spanish dom. They've shown that there is a gradual expansion in the number and type of verb that select a. So this narrative seems to show that language contact really plays a role in the Iberian varieties such as Spanish and Catalan. So language contact comes here, whereas nominal and verbal syncretisms seem to root from Proto-Romance and Latin. Thank you very much.